So about 3 years ago, I attended Any Questions, which is like the radio version of Question Time. And I watched an all-male panel again be interviewed. And I was all riled up at the end of it to really go at the producer, who happened to be a woman, to ask her, where are all these women who are supposed to be on these panels? Because the BBC has told us they're committing to all female panels. And I was really ready for one. And she came at me saying, don't even start on that. If I had a penny for every woman I've asked to come on this panel, I would be rich. For every man I ask to come on here, I have to ask hundreds of women, because they all think they're going to need to know all about politics. They need to be up to their ears in prep. They're going to need to be perfect. And there's something really interesting in that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what finds me in this mess, standing on this stage in front of you. Because I thought that day, I need to get more women to say yes to stuff. These opportunities come along. Why are women not saying yes? So then at 11 o'clock last night, when I just finished a tennis match, which I lost, and I got a phone call from Pim to say, what are we up to tomorrow? I had to stand by that. But that's the reason for mentioning it, is it's important for you as leaders of organisations to know how different people tick. Now, I know there are some great women who are great on their feet. We've just watched a beautiful presenter modelling fantastic presentation skills. But as a statistic, women are hard to get up on their feet, and that's interesting. So you're going to have to help me through this. I definitely know what I'm talking about. Whether I talk about the same things that I have on my slides is a whole different kettle of fish, so we'll see what happens. I'm going to be asking who fits in, who belongs, how do you help people belong more, and how do you keep hold of people? How do you attract great talent, and how do you keep hold of it? That this whole premise of belonging is a really important thing that could help you with retention and recruitment. Beyond the HR process, Caroline, where are you? Are you still here? There's Caroline, who I'm sure with your HR hat would have loads of wisdom to share about the actual recruitment process and how you advertise, how you appeal to women, and not just women, but all protected characteristics, all sorts of people who are hard to get on your boards. There are all sorts of conversations to be having around this. 20 minutes is just a glimmer of hope of starting to get the conversation going. So I'm Ali King-Smith. I've spent my career developing leaders across all sorts of global organisations, from huge ones to teeny tiny ones, working with lead teams often to try and work out how they can operate better together, how they can hit top performance more quickly, more easily. Across my career, I've been drawn to the gender agenda. And once I did set up a company which was all about producing equality, fighting the good fight. And I realised not only was it tiring and exhausting and unlikely to work, it wasn't incorporating the whole leadership conversation. It was a kind of stick add-on. And which is why now at Clearworks, which is my leadership consultancy, we build inclusive language, inclusive thinking into all the work that we do. Some of the programs that we've run are specifically for one sector of your population, and others are not. So there are pros and cons to both of those. I'm really happy to talk about any of those if anyone's got a specific interest in those. So you've heard about the prettiness bias, tallness. Anyone heard of the prettiness bias? You're more likely to get a job if you're pretty. Did you know that? And if you're tall. So if you are a white, straight, able-bodied, heterosexual, Western, educated, middle-class, tall, handsome man, there's one. You are lucky from birth. Things will be easier for you than if all of those things were not true. If you Google the Wheel of Privilege, I didn't want to put it up on the slide because I don't know how to attribute it to the right artist, but it's a beautiful thing. And it looks at those combinations of things that can make life harder for you. It's called the Wheel of Privilege, and I would really recommend having a look at that. So first job is to just get the language right, diversity and inclusion. Is anyone really comfortable what the difference is between diversity and inclusion? I'm sure I've got some people who are extremely talented in this specialty. So nobody's 100% certain. So diversity is the different types of people in your organisation, from colour to age, to neurodiversity, to ethnic background, to education, all the different sorts of difference. But you can get those people to come whether or not they feel like they belong and they are included in the big conversations and the decisions is a whole different kettle of fish. And that is a commercial conversation, so inclusion matters. These organisations who have inclusive practices, inclusive cultures, are outperforming companies that don't. So it does matter. Not only does it perform better, but it keeps people for longer, so you can see the cost saving in that. Equity and equality, I finally found a way to explain it when I did a big walk recently. I'm just back from walking the Offa's Dyke Trail. That's basically the England-Wales border from Chepstow to Prestatyn. Awesome walk. And finally, for the first time in 53 years, I found a rucksack which is built for chicks. I found a woman's rucksack, which means the shoulders are narrower at the top and the hips are wider, which means I can wear it and I can carry more weight, and it doesn't hurt. So that's what equitable practice would be. So if you build me a rucksack that I can wear, that it fits me, that would be more equitable than what equality would be. If the rucksacks were equal, Pim and I would be given the same bag to carry. That's what equality is. Equity means we each have a bag which feels comfortable on our own back. So does that make sense as a description? I think that's the first time I've been able to kind of make it work in real language. So if you imagine you gave my little rucksack to Pim, he would have blisters by the time he got to the top of the mountain. Metaphorically, women have been carrying a rucksack that's too wide and too long, and then being told that they can't carry a rucksack. And it's potentially just because it was the wrong shape all along. I mean, we all know probably by now that crash test dummies were built in male form. So we've tested cars for safety on big guys, but we haven't tested them on little women, which is why ribs get broken and worse. So my aims today, they're to make sure everyone feels really confident with the language around ED&I, and also to give you pause for thought about personal steps that you can take right now back in the business that don't cost money, or that do cost a bit of money, or that cost loads of money. So all the different ways that you can have a look at this in your organisation. This is supposed to be a picture of Gen Z. My daughter got me this. Gen Z are the folks born between about 1997 and 2012. They are not going to put up with non-inclusive leadership in organisations. They just won't put up with it. Is that somebody looking? I can't see in the. Have I got a Gen Zer looking at me going, yeah. So, hooray! You can teach me all about this. Generational diversity is a really big, important thing. I can't speak for Gen Z because I'm not Gen Z, but it was interesting. It came up earlier on. It was a really nice question about leading Gen Z. My personal sense is there's a huge undertaking for us to learn how to manage and lead Gen Z, because we can't imagine what it's like to be digitally native as they are. We need to be asking questions and understanding what their expectations are. There are certainly some things we can do across sector, understanding that people are likely to move more in their career. And what if we all got braver, if we all upskilled everybody more and then they just moved around? That's really different from the thinking used to be, I'm going to train my people and I'm going to keep them forever. Yeah, it's a really different take that Gen Z are going to have on it. PwC's workplace report, I can't remember the name of the actual report, that actually asked young men, would they take jobs where they knew there was a gender pay gap? And the answer in Gen Z is no. So the men aren't going to put up with it, not just the women. It's going to become a problem for more people. So let's talk about the difference between belonging and fitting in. So Brené Brown, has anyone seen her TED talk about daring greatly? Brené Brown's become quite famous for her take on leadership. She is a social worker by background and a researcher from Texas, and she's done lots of work now in understanding leadership culture. And she's just published a new book where this conversation about the opposite of belonging is fitting in, and how interesting that is as a challenge. And that if we don't feel we belong, we feel like we're trying to fit in. And if we trying to fit in, there's toil involved in that. It's not easy for us to fit in. Now, the interesting part in the scale-up, sizing-up world is that it's much easier to scale if we all think the same. If everybody looks, feels, sounds the same, there's swiftness to that. It's like WD-40 for the cogs. We like people who are like us. We think the same. We don't fall out. Everyone agrees. We just plough forward. There is speed in that. And actually, the brave research shows that homogenous teams do accelerate more quickly if everybody's the same. You go. And then, smack, you hit the wall. Because if everybody sees the world through the same lens, where's the innovation going to come from and where's the growth? And that's where the crunch comes. You probably heard of Mothercare going bust when they didn't have any women on the board, never mind mothers. So they didn't represent the customers or the workforce in the top team. So obviously innovation is going to be curtailed. Same as my conversation about Gen Z. I wouldn't imagine being able to sell something to Gen Z without having Gen Z at the top of the team. So just looking at this word belonging, I'm sorry, a few of you have heard me wang on about belonging before, so just bear with me for a couple of models. Any psychology field that you look at has belonging mentioned in it. So I'm sure lots of you have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. That yellow slice, love and belonging, that's one of the key slices of whether or not we feel okay, if we feel like we belong. So if you're working in an organisation where you're not sure if you do, you can't see yourself represented, you're a trailblazer, all very exciting, but do I actually belong here? It takes less toil to jump into another organisation where I do feel as if I belong. This work is called the Human Givens. This is fantastic research based on the 9 core things that if all of these are in place, I will be psychologically healthy. So one of those being off whack will lead to me not being okay. So let's take intimacy and community as 2 things in there that might represent belonging. Am I part of something? And do I feel understood? Have I got an emotional connection with people around me? These sorts of things don't get talked about very often in the lead team when you're talking about building an organisation. And my request to you would be to consider pushing them off the fluffy end of the spectrum and onto the key business requirement for understanding how to recruit people and how to retain them over the long term. Now, just let me pause there a second and catch up with myself. Breaking it down into what might help. 3 core areas are helpful to look at, I would say. Societal barriers, the stuff that gets in the way. Personal barriers, so the things that we do to and for other people, and also the things that we do to get in our own way, so the 2 sorts of those, and organisational barriers. Those can be broken down into the whole systemic stuff and also teams. And I think if you're a leader of an organisation which isn't giant, hasn't got a massive budget, and potentially isn't masses of people, looking at a team basis can be a really nice place to start. If you can start building inclusive leadership within one team, it will grow and it will spread. Societally, the barriers are gigantic. And I think if I try and go there in the however many minutes I've got left, that's a fail. So I won't try and change society in one conversation. However, a couple of themes just to bring to your attention. One is the broken rung. So we've heard about the glass ceiling. Has anyone heard of the broken rung? It's a new concept. So there's a lovely HBR article about the broken rung, and this is something that I would really push to Silverstone Tech Cluster as something that is right within your control and influence. Of every 100 men that get promoted into their first management position, only 87 women also do. That's an incredible statistic, that very first step up. So once you get further up into leadership, the toil on women to be leaders, from having babies, having menopauses, all the chapters and transitions that come at a woman that will likely risk her career unless she's really doing something spectacular to keep it on the rails, already by that first leadership promotion, she's behind. And that next statistic is what's called intersection, so where 2 things combine, being a woman and being of colour, being a man and not being heterosexual. Those 2 things in combination will derail even further. So that mathematical equation, if you had another intersection, a woman of colour who is gay, more numbers knocked off, less likelihood of getting promoted. So if you know that that's happening really early and women are getting whack-a-mole with other things further up, the one thing that you can do is help women get promoted when they deserve to, really easily, really quickly, no barriers in the way. And that first rung, getting past the broken rung, is a really impactful thing that can help. There's a big question, which is why bother? obviously. If you're just helping somebody get to somewhere you don't think they belong, that's one thing. But actually really owning the idea that if we look at the world differently, innovation will be better. That's where the change will come. The other idea that's just come to me in the last couple of weeks, so I won't try and be too knowledgeable about it, is the glass cliff. So the glass ceiling was talked about when I was a kid, and then this broken rung came up, and now this glass cliff has just come to my attention. Turns out, in periods of dramatic downturn in organisations, in crisis, in COVID, in disaster, women and other people of protected characteristics are promoted more easily for some reason. Perhaps it's because we think they're more caring, perhaps they can catch things that have gone off whack. I don't know what the reason is, but that happens, and then statistically, they're set up to fail. So these women come in to save the day, and then bang, it doesn't work out, it was the woman's fault. That's what I'm starting to read about, and I would urge you to explore that a little bit more if you're interested in that sort of thing. But that's the extent of my understanding of it at the moment, but Sheryl Sandberg is talking about it a lot, who's the Facebook COO. Now, organisationally, so if we go to the second bit, so societal, organisational, one of the things that we've found in coaching and leadership consultancy is bringing people together in communities builds belonging. So let's say Maslow, Human Givens, Mia Pringle's needs of children, all of these psychological models are saying people like to belong. How can you create that belonging really easily? So instead of coaching people individually or randomly or by job function, we've invited people to come together by shared purpose. So if I give you a specific example, at Roche Genentech in Basel, they've got a very niche problem where women were disappearing out of the senior science pipeline and they didn't know why. Turns out, in their world, which is the supply chain is rather in the middle of nowhere, people end up dating really early in their career, then they get married, and then the man gets promoted to San Francisco and the woman gets hoiked out of her senior leadership science career to go with him. Who knew that the person that you took a drink from at the age of 28 was going to limit your career by the time you get to 45? Interesting. But we were brought in to try and crack that as a specific problem. And bringing women together with one coach across time so they could bring their own problem, their own thing they wanted to talk about. So it's not imposed by the organisation, but what's the thing that would really make a difference to you to talk about? They would bring the ones that you might guess. How do I have the big conversation with my boss about this? How do I ask for more money? I've been passed over for promotion again. I'm going on mat leave and I don't know how I'm going to manage it all. So those conversations come, as well as all leadership conversations. The community is built and the confidentiality is set, and they travel along together as a group. Now, the big opportunity that came unexpectedly during COVID was the online community. So we had a week where everything fell out of our diary and we were terrified. You're going to wave a thing at me soon. We were terrified. The business just seemed to go poof. And then all of a sudden we decided to try this, what we call circles, Clearworks circles, online. How would they turn out? Turns out we can bring women together from Toronto, from Beijing, from Basel, from London, all into the same group. And now they feel connected with each other. And the conversations that they had were deep and important and kept them in the leadership talent pipeline. Thank you. So that's something, if the trust is high and your organisation has got warmth already, that's something you could be implementing in your organisation. Where are there groups of shared purpose? It's a silo-busting exercise, and it also honours the fact that often in these very minority female organisations, take supply chain or logistics, where there's perhaps one woman in a continent with all the guys, they can then connect with other people and travel along together through their career. Reporting back successes to each other is massively impactful, and also taking it in turns to be up and down. It's inspiring to know that that person was down last month and now this month they're up, and I will also do that. We are all up and down together. We've had people stay in the organisation who said they were going to leave. We've had people go for promotions and get jobs that they'd been passed over for in the past. So all sorts of things, good stuff going on. Sorry about the slide, the rubbish slide. This was my 1 o'clock in the morning slide, where I was trying to think how to express about external modelling of who belongs. So if you if you just take a few minutes to go through all your materials, go through your website, go through what you give to clients, go through your last PowerPoint presentations, what are the pictures of? What are the words of? Are the people in the pictures the people that you're trying to have belong? Because I was really surprised. I had a little scoot through some of the Silverstone Technology Cluster websites, and some of them you do have to hunt for anybody who's not in one particular specialist characteristic. And if that's what you're indicating, that's what you're indicating. So I've just had it in my tennis club as an example. I wanted to buy a new shirt for my team, went onto the website. Everything is for men. There are no female shirts listed at all. The signal I get is women teams aren't really taken as seriously as the men's teams. Men are more welcome here. Maybe you need a new tennis club. This is not Dustin, by the way. And so that's the signal I'm receiving loud and clear, is this is not for you. And already I'm thinking, I'll maybe go play for somebody else. And that's what can happen in your organisation if people don't feel like they belong. So on the individual, what can you do specifically yourself? The obvious thing is to learn. Be hunting down your biases, be hunting down the things that you do that are not compliant with inclusive leadership, asking people for feedback, being super brave and super authentic about how do you experience me, what are the things that I do that you wish I didn't do, what could I do better, how could I understand your world better? So looking at a worldview differently in ways that you never have done before. Focus on belonging versus fitting in and really have a think about that. I'm just going to finish by just reading you a poem that somebody sent me, one of our clients actually from a coaching circle. It touched me very deeply. And it speaks to what people turn down in themselves when they're fitting in, when they're trying to fit in, how effortful and what toil that takes. It's by Donna Ashworth, and it's called The Cost. The fitting in has cost me. It's cost me dear indeed. I took off parts that were too much in order to succeed. I wrestled with my largeness. I did my best to shrink. I tried to round my edges to filter what I think. I shaved off all my quirks and I learned to bite my tongue. I locked my heart up with a key. I did that very young. The fitting in has cost me. It's cost me dear indeed. Why learn to fit their pattern when you're born to take the lead? So good luck with your inclusive leadership journey. I'll be on the panel for any questions, and I'll also be around later. We've also got a podcast starting in the spring called Lab to Leadership, which will be me and my team just chatting about stuff we think might be helpful to pick up along the way. So if that's helpful, please tell us. And if you've got specific conversations you'd like us to have about retention, recruitment, and leadership development, chip in, because it's early days and we're still recording. We can get onto that if it's helpful. Thank you for the invitation to speak.